Let's hit a few main ideas about lubricants. There are a number of slides in this slideshow that are just for your reference, and we're going to skim over them, but I want to hit just a few concepts. So when you have two parts moving relative to each other, there are actually three components operating there. One part, the other part, and the lubricant between them. And you have to have lubricant between them, otherwise you have parts rubbing on parts and you have damage. The lubricant, its main job, of course, is to keep these two parts separated. So there's this low friction film in between the two parts that keeps them sliding or rotating. But this lubricant can also dissipate heat. And heat comes from friction. Heat is bad for oil. So in a machine that you're designing, you're keeping an eye on what is the oil temperature, and if it gets above a certain point, like it might be 400, 450, that's enough to make the oil break down. Something has gone horribly wrong, and so you want to start doing some troubleshooting. If you don't have a film of oil and the two metal parts touch each other, what you get is, of course, there are high points and low points on any piece of metal, and you will get the high points of one part touching the high points of the other part and knocking off chunks of metal. These little peaks get knocked off. And where do they go? They go back into the system that you're trying to keep smooth. So it gradually chews itself up. So if the surface is too rough, these sharp points can dig through the film of oil. So not only does it happen if there's not enough oil, it happens if the surface is too rough and you get pointy things. Interestingly enough, you also have problems if the surface is too smooth, because then you don't have any place for the oil to cling. You don't have an oil film, you just have smooth stuff where the oil flows away. More stuff. This slide is here to help you remember what viscosity means. And it comes from a Latin word for bird lime. And I'm sorry, this is kind of horrible, but this is where it comes from. The ancient Romans would make this bird lime, which is sticky stuff, white sticky stuff. They would make it from mistletoe. This is a picture of mistletoe, or holly tree bark. Boil it up and it would get sticky. And they would smear this sticky viscum on sticks, and then when small birds would fly by, they would use these sticky sticks to catch the birds, and then they would kill them and eat them. So that is a way to remember that viscosity essentially means sticky. So when you're trying to remember, wait, is it low viscosity makes it more slippery, or is it high viscosity makes it more slippery? High viscosity makes it sticky. That means low viscosity makes it slippery. That's a way to remember it. Classification systems. Here's some stuff. You've probably seen viscosity numbers from SAE if you've looked at cans of motor oil. All right, moving on. There are different types of lubricant. One type is grease, and grease starts with oil and then there's a thickening agent added to it. So you see this in packing wheel bearings use grease. How can we install grease? Well, you've probably seen a grease gun. There are some other kinds of systems. And I want to point out a thing called a grease Zerk. So a grease gun would go onto a Zerk and squirt grease into your bearing or whatever. Zerk, Z-E-R-K, is a fitting that is threaded in with pipe threads, not regular threads. So it's either 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch threads. They're pretty small little things. NPT stands for National Pipe Taper. Pipe threads are tapered. All right, guess that's it. You can get dry lubricants, and where you might have encountered this is graphite. You can buy spray bottles of powdered graphite and squirt it into locks if they're sticky. Oil is the liquid stuff we're familiar with, and oil has so many additives. There are oil suppliers with technical engineers who will come out to your facility and advise you about what special recipe of oil and oil additives do you need for your particular situation. Then you will recall maybe when we talked about roller chain, we were looking at different types of supplying oil. And so that type A was the manual method. Think oil can. Gloop, gloop, gloop. There was the splash method where the chain comes down and dips into some oil and goes back up. There was the oil bath where there's a continuous bath that it dips into. And we didn't talk about this, but there are gravity feed machines that will just gradually meter oil dripping down into the machinery, with some fancy kinds of equipment for depositing this. In a high-speed, high-volume manufacturing setting, you may get these pressurized oil systems. So there you are. The main points to remember are what does viscosity mean, and we need to separate the surfaces with a film of lubricant.